The other day, we were all on WFAE. We did an hour on Charlotte Talks, and we disagreed, we debated, we talked. It was an entire hour, and I left the studio kind of uplifted. Not by the fact that sort of Nolan and Mike tag teamed against the Met Deck and were skeptical, but the fact that we all disagreed respectfully. We gave each other time to talk, to issue our evidence, our thoughts. We had fun. It was vigorous. It was slightly contentious, but that's okay. And I left that studio going, oh my God, okay. The Met Deck miracles will never cease, because I thought our ability to disagree passionately with each other in a respectful, interesting way had gone away. And I was like, oh my God, that's really cool. You can kind of argue and debate and still be friends. And I think all we've ever asked is that people who maybe are skeptical of the Met Deck, at least they look at the facts, they do their homework, they respect those men and those families enough to at least sort of invest the time to look into it. And Nolan has done that above and beyond the duty, the call of duty, and I really appreciate it. And I think that's only good for Charlotte history and what we're all trying to accomplish. So I wanted to say that.
Nolan gave, that was a great presentation, by the way. It was really good and thoughtful, and he gives a rational, the anti-ish view that I had to put forth when I wrote my book, which was, because if you just approach it from it's all true and just take it, that's going to be less convincing than at least 10 years ago. Now we know that it's been established, we're past that. But no, so when I was working on this project, and we started the 20th Society many years ago, that was literally the goal. It was like the needle was so far in its complete hoax camp, right, that our goal was to put it back in the middle at a minimum, if not move it the other direction, which is where it should be. And so when I started writing the book, because I knew nothing about this topic at all. And no one really ever knew more than maybe the Wikipedia version of that. I'm not sure that existed then. But I was astonished, as I'm sure you were, when you start looking into it. You're like, look at all this stuff. Like, all of it has certain, evidentiary problems, say, from a lawyer's perspective, but there's so much of it. So it had gone so far to the extreme of, you didn't talk about a polite society, and we just said, we're going to bring it back where it needs to be, so we can just have a normal, rational conversation. So we still have some flat reserves that we'll work on this.
And I have to say, we should take a moment to appreciate what Scott and May 20th and all the sort of local historians and Met Deck supporters have been able to do, because again, talking about sort of like a little bit of perspective in society at large, think about the effort it takes to move the needle from that's a stupid hoax, stop dressing up, go away, to okay, we have something happened. And that's really, we've talked a few times this past several weeks. At this point, I can't even tell what day it is. But we've talked a few times, and I haven't addressed this specifically to you and what you guys have been able to accomplish. The vibe has changed, and that's a huge thing. People are interested, they're excited, even if they're on the fence. It used to be like pulling teeth, and I think moving the needle to where it is now, to neutral or maybe sort of right of neutral, is a huge accomplishment.
Well, that's very kind of you. It is, like I say all the time, it is a team sport, and some of the team members who've been with me on this for 20 years, including my lovely wife Gail, who loves this story and hearing about it. But yeah, honestly, we just thought it was such a great story that everyone would gravitate towards. They just didn't know about it, so we just had to tell them. And we were very young and naive about that. And we talked many times. The resistance that we got from a lot of segments of society. Now we're in this sort of celebratory phase. Look at us. But you wouldn't believe some of the resistance and trying to find a polite word, the aggro that we got from many parts of the community, including the historical community at times, of, you know, why are you doing this? Who do you think you are? We've dropped this as a topic. Why are you bringing it back up? Which really surprised us because we were just sort of like, hey, this is a good thing, let's have a party, really. That was really it. Which metastasized over 2 decades. And so that's, you know, that's always, and this is what we talk so well about. Charlotte's got a kind of schizophrenic relationship with this story. In fact, you know, as you say, if any other town in America had this story, it would be like, it would be the greatest, it would be a tourism boom, it'd be in the papers, but for some reason here, there's always been like this drive the car with the parking brake on attitude towards this. And I don't know why.
I'm a fan of donuts, so I always use that as my metaphor. I'm like, it's like you're trying to feed Charlotte donuts, and they're going, you've got this great backstory, this great origin story that every town in America, every city in America would kill for, and Charlotte's like, no, I'd rather have broccoli. I don't want these donuts. Here.
I was just going to say, you go to Garden and Come, and in the back is a huge full one-page ad for the Halifax Resolves commemoration in April, this last April. And you know, it's a tourism thing, and they talk all about it. You go to the airport, there's a whole South Carolina 1776 exhibition set up for 100 yards in the airport. But, you know, for whatever reason, it just does North Carolina. This is a North Carolina thing as well as Charlotte, to be honest with you. I don't know what the resistance is, but I don't know what it is. What do you think?
Boy, we've debated this and talked about this, and I think that one of the interesting things with the book being a national release, it is almost more popular outside of North Carolina. And some of the events I've done events. I'm going up to Boston later in the month. I've been to the Virginia Museum of History, which in the little contract rider, I was like, will you provide a bodyguard for me? So close to Monticello. And they were like, no, people are actually really into it. And people are really interested. And yeah, we have different theories, but and I feel like, again, it's moving, but, and stuff like this, stuff like the exhibit, I think will really help. It just brings it to life. And that was the main thing when I walked in today was, I feel like every time I do an event like this, and I think, oh my gosh, how much more are we going to talk about this? I have nothing left to say, I have nothing left to learn. And then you walk in, and I think your book especially, and my book a little bit, sort of come. It's like being inside the books in this exhibit. And I thought, and then you see the different pictures, and I love the Jefferson and Adams, their little sort of back and forth. And I thought, oh my God, they got me. I'm all jazzed up for the Met Decade again.
That was it. I was like, I've seen and heard and read every single thing on this like 14 times over at this point. Then I walked in, I was like, it's all fresh.
Yeah.
Like, wow, look at this. This is really, 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 really good. Well, you know, go back to when we started the group, you know, there's so little tangible, visible pieces of this story, right? The documents go on, start with that. And then you've got other than the Rock House in this museum, there's nothing to go look at. You can go find some cemeteries, you can go find a spring, but there's no institutional thing, right? Like in Boston, you've got the buildings in the square where these things happen, and the word Charleston, all of it is still right in your face, right? We've built something around it. So to bring this back, move the needle back, we deliberately said we've got to institutionalize this. Because it's just books and sort of parties and stuff, it'll be great for a while, and it'll be gone again. And so the first thing we did, as many of you probably all you know, is we had our friend Chastain put up his remarkable equestrian statue of Captain Jack, which was like putting the flag down of like, you can't miss this, right? That was goal number one. And then honestly, the beer, when OB did the beer, and now and Lost Worlds is doing this great beer stew now. The beers have been a total radicalized thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, 100%. And people are like, oh, wow, what is this? And then honestly, your book too. I mean, when I read your book first, it's like, this is exactly what we needed to take this to the next level. This is exactly like my wife will tell you, I was just cackling out loud. I was like, this is going to be fantastic. because this is going to, as we said the other night, I shouldn't quote myself here, but what we said 20 years ago when we got all this resistance was, we're going to take the story and we're going to shove it down everybody's throat.
That's PR 101 right there. No, I think what I like is the connection to the original mech deckers, right? The fact that it's connected to beer. And I feel like everything they did was connected to whiskey and distilling and all that stuff, and that God love them. And there is one of the things that I think you love when you learn this story, and especially if you're somebody who moved to Charlotte. What's Charlotte all about? What's our identity? Who are we? The thing I loved the most was like, I can relate to these guys going, we're not messing around, and we're not going to beat around the bush. We're going to put it in writing and declare that we're ready to start fighting. And I feel like the sort of like shoving up people's throats, there's a connection. There's a spiritual connection between Scott Syfert and Thomas Polk, and I love that.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of had to push this thing along. And the more, animosity you got, the more you kind of got energized the perspectives. But yeah, so we were talking earlier, this, if you study the history of this in the exhibit, you'll see it. This celebration too has ebbs and flows. And we're on a big tide for 15 years now. But it has a tendency to kind of go away, or go dormant at least, for years at a time. So we got to continue, hopefully we're in a continuing peak. And I think we are. We've got institutional stuff now. We got books, we got statues, we got beers. So let me ask you, what should be next? Like, what's the next phase of this? Where does this go from here? Well, no, it's an honest question.
I've got this all planned out, Scott. It's the mech deck is going to fall out of someone's family Bible within the next couple of weeks, I think. And then our job, we can retire from it. No, I think that's a really good reminder. And we every time we do an event together, we always remind people, it's like, how's it going to change? Again, connected back to the original spirit of the mech deck. It's going to change. It's going to change on a grassroots level. I wish that this got in 60 minutes or something like that, and there's still a chance that could happen.
Netflix.
Yes. Yeah. But I still think for the time being, until that happens, or until the document falls out of someone's family Bible, I'll tell a quick story about that after this. It's up to each one of us. It's the latest, newest version of the mech deck army, right? Charlotte, I love the idea that they're finally going to remind people that part of the mech deck and the spirit of Mecklenburg changed the tide of the Southern campaign of the Revolutionary War, and basically, helped us win our independence. They're all connected between the mech deck and that, and so we still need to maintain that spirit. And it's like we deputize everybody at every event where it's like, I wish it were easier than this, but it's going to take each and every person to even just push back, remind people that it's not a hoax, to respect the military veterans and the original patriots that we know were involved in this. It's like, it's up to each person.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, it is like Mike Collins asked us, I think the other day, why does this matter? For someone else today, actually, a different thing. But and I thought about it for a second, and I said, it's our origin story. It's the community's origin story. This is where it all starts. I've never thought about that before, but that's really what it is. Like that, this is the foundation for the community at that time, and all the sort of values and so forth that sort of bleed through 250 years of history all started there.
Yeah, and I get that question a lot too, which is bizarre to me. Why does it matter being first? I was like, I think it was NPR, and I was like, I don't know, ask Neil Armstrong. Or Roger Bannister, it's like, yeah, and I think Mike, God love him, but he had a hard time, I think, in our discussion, understanding the importance of those 14 months. It's night and day between the two documents. And he would not concede that point, but Jefferson scholars and Declaration of Independence scholars, there's a consensus that that was essentially overdue paperwork. We were already at war, but we were at risk of losing the war, whereas the MECDEC was a bold, very risky, life-threatening decision to put it in writing. There's a huge difference between those 14 months.
No, there's a through line exactly from 1775 to 1780, and everyone here knows the 1775 story very well, probably a lot of 1780 story. But when you read the letters and the journals and the post-war memoirs of the British officers after the Revolutionary War who were here in 1780, it casts a lot of light on, well, how could this have happened in 1775? Who were these people? And there's one quote, a couple of quotes, but my favorite goes from Bannister Tarleton's post-war memoirs, when he says, it was evident and had been frequently mentioned to the king's officers that the counties of Mecklenburg and Rouen were more hostile to England than any other in America. More hostile than any other. And of course, Cornwallis with the Hornets Nest comment, which we can't find the source of, so that's also a bit of local lore, and historians look for it. But he does say, this county, this county of Mecklenburg is more inveterate than any other, except perhaps the Jerseys.
New Jersey, yeah. Go figure. So those are the kind of original badasses who founded Charlotte. It's like we need to keep that spirit going. And those men sound a lot different than the idiot who called them drunk squirrel hunters. I'm just like push back. And I always think it's funny. Most of them, the guys who really thought up and drafted the MECDEC, they all went to Princeton.
Right.
I mean, they probably did get drunk and hunt squirrels, but they graduated from Princeton.
Yeah. It's part of there are a bunch of yo-yos in the woods. How would they know anything about this? They went to Princeton.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Thanks.
I mean, is Princeton a party school? Or maybe it was back then. When you went through, did you have some favorite parts of the exhibit?
The Taft chair, if you have not been in it, by the way, it's so great. But the Taft chair, so we met with short story in that. And Taft was here in 1909, I believe, and spoke at Biddle Hall, now Johnson C. Smith. And so we knew about the Taft chair. We met with the Johnson C. Smith people 15 years ago, I forget why, and something said, well, you've got the Taft chair. And they're like, what's that? Like, that's the chair that Taft sat in when he spoke here. They're like, is it that chair right there? We're like, yeah, I think that's it. Like, we've always wondered what that was. We have no idea. Very Charlotte story.
Very Charlotte.
Very on brand for Charlotte history story too, a little bit. That's great. I always love the diorama because that, when I started writing the book, because I became completely down the rabbit hole like I did to you.
Thanks.
You start thinking, what do these people wear? Like, what did it sound like to live here? Like, there's no machinery. How quiet was it? Things like that. What did they drink? What was it like to live with no electricity? Right? When the sun went down, it got dark. Just things are kind of unimaginable to us, but going through that process of trying to figure all that, and seeing sort of stuff like that, the guns, the sort of day-to-day life stuff, because it's such a different world, and what they did throughout that period of the Revolution, when you read books and so forth, which I know all of you have, is so incredible. When we compare what is sort of a distraction or difficult for us in our modern lives, you're like, the British stole all our chickens and stole our dog. Right? That was that kind of work. And all our food, right? And so now we have nothing. And then burn house now.
And I like the diagram too, because from the very first time I stepped foot in here doing research, it's been here, it does help bring it to life. And it does, again, make you imagine, it only makes the MECDEC even that more incredible. That this community, which basically came, they left two different countries, crossed an ocean, and crossed basically the American colonial frontier to get away from everything and to isolate themselves. And the fact that they still sort of had the wherewithal and the patriotism to declare independence and sort of lead us it's incredible when you do realize also that it happened right at Trade and Tryon, where you can where we were all standing just the other day, just the direct line between the cradle of American independence and that you can stand there to this day. It's just amazing.
It is. But the problem is, going back to what we talked about earlier, you have to imagine a lot of this stuff, which is, we just don't have stuff to see, which is why this exhibition is so important, because it doesn't make it real. You can see, oh wow, there's this and this and this wonderful stuff. And look at all the celebrations over 200 years.
Yeah. I think people are going to come in here, it's going to make them go, oh, it's okay to be into this. Look at all the people and look at all the stuff you can look at and touch. It's not just
something with it, like you're talking
Oh yes, we were at the Trade and Tryon for the new commemoration, and people were asking for selfies, and after like the third or fourth one, I said, hold on just a second, and I immediately called both of my daughters and said, guess who's getting selfie requests? Dan's not the history nerd.
So impressed. I used to do a presentation on this. A PowerPoint, and the first 10 slides was my poor son Harrison as a wee lad in every possible cemetery, reenactment, whatever. It's all the different places. He's standing there. Everyone he looks like the most unhappy kid. Everyone used to stand like this. Cemeteries like no great, another cemetery. We took on, this is off topic, but it's such a good story. We took our kids to Gettysburg 10 years ago for 4th of July, which of course is more or less the anniversary of the battle. And through Andrew Roberts, had contacted him because he was at the time, the British historian who was head of the National Battlefields Guide. And I said, hey, who would you recommend we have a tour of Gettysburg with? And he said, oh, my friend so-and-so just worked with Gettysburg because the rest of history at Gettysburg College. And yours is, I'll call him like. Amazing. So we did. So we went up there. It was the 3rd of July. It was 85 degrees at 9 in the morning, right? We met at 8:30 with this professor. He's kind of like, who are you people? Like, what am I doing? But it took us, and we went for 6 hours. And if you're into history, military history, especially Gettysburg, it was unbelievable. It was just unbelievable. All the way to the final charge on the hill, and exactly 3:02, which you did on purpose when the picket starts and so forth. And so we wrapped up at like 4 o'clock. And I said to my daughter, I said, what do you guys think? And she said, dead man, it was the worst day of my life. Oh, it's off topic.
Okay, so Nolan's got us on, it's like a countdown, it's like a Mission Impossible countdown clock. Are we going to be ejected from the theater? Oh, that's good.
Alright, folks. My first question is why are you lying?
Anybody have any questions? Yeah, alright. We'll go. Sarah Sue, kick us off. Another author.
Yeah, I'll hold up my part, by the way. Trade and Tryon is the center, it's the epicenter, no doubt about it. Charlotte was where it actually was signed, but it wasn't where it was created. It was born out in the counties, out in all the counties, and it's wonderfully distributed around the counties. And there are artifacts out in the counties. Now, how do we tie that in so that people can get to Davidson's place and Barry's place and Graham's place and all the places that really still do exist that were a part of this?
Oh, well, we've begun to answer that question, and I would love to sort of continue this maybe on indefinitely, but with Boss Worlds, and I think Dave is here, right, the owner of Boss Worlds? Yes. This is a perfect solution. Dave created basically a beer, bus, and neck deck tour where we just piled people into a full-size bus and we drove them around to the neck deck sites, and it was sold out. We had a good time. It was I think the secret is tricking people into learning the story, but just by telling them they're going to have fun. And I think the minute we finished that, we all thought, boy, we could replicate this, we could expand it. Again, you add beer to anything, and it makes it a lot better.
I'll also add, Sarah, so you mentioned some of the signers like John Davidson, John Violet up at Rural Hill, just want to give them a shout out. But there are ways that you can get involved just like as an individual. I'll give my own LinkedIn a shout out. But what I did a few years ago is that basically I just went up there and I cleaned John Violet's graves. Their monuments, they were looking really bad, covered in lichen, now they're sparkling white, right? There's just little things like that you can do that take 2 hours in an afternoon that really sort of will make you feel more connected to these stories, but they will also help other people become more connected as well. So that's something I would suggest. So, any other questions?
I've been fascinated by an excerpt in your book about going to London in the archives, a letter from the royal governor of North Carolina to the king. And in the letter there was a mention of an attachment which has disappeared. I don't recall all the details of that. I'm an old man, I have a good memory, but it really fascinates me how you found it. The note that attempted to explain that the attachment had been removed, and any further details about that? I think that's a telling part of the story of Rebecca.
Yes, I do as well, since at one point in the middle of the research, you talk about your family sort of having become obsessed as much as we were. I texted my wife, and this text exchange is in the book. Was something like, I think I need to go to London. And she was like, is this MacTech related? Yes. Like, will you use frequent flyer miles? Yes. She was like, cheerio, then but it was, the spirit of the book was kind of like, wherever there's a place to go, wherever there's someone to talk to. And I really just learned this all from Scott. It's like, go there, get in front of them, do the research, get your hands dirty, boots on the ground. And the British National Archives were a perfect example of that, as was Freedom Spring. And the story quickly is that, if you understand the context of the MacDec, it makes much more sense that these men declared independence. It would have been strange if they hadn't declared independence, if you know the full context of a region just essentially in open rebellion. And Josiah Martin was, he was pleading with the king and with the Earl of Dartmouth, who would have been like the Secretary of State for England. He was like, I need troops, I need money, I need help. He's like, these crazy people are already in rebellion. And part of one of those letters, he nervously, I think, wrote a letter a day, and they started numbering them. And dispatch 34 was, I need money, I need help, I need troops, and not only because they're in open rebellion, these crazy people in Charlotte have already written it down, have already declared it. And I've attached proof of the MacDec or these documents that were reprinted in the Cape Fear Mercury. And that letter and the newspaper went into the British National Archives until a crony of Jefferson's, after there became a lot of attention around had he plagiarized not just the MacDec but other documents in writing his Declaration of Independence. And so you wanted to find this, number one, because you could possibly be holding a copy or a printed version of the MacDec in your hands. So I spent the whole day in the British National Archives, couldn't find anything. At the very last second, as I was handing the folder in, the archivist turned it over and there was a note card out there. And I said, what's that note card mean? And the woman said, oh geez, she takes it off, it was stapled, so she pulls off, she goes, it's a note that says there's an additional addendum to this file. She's like, well, we're closing in 5 minutes, you can go take care of it, blah, 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 blah. So I sprint across the British National Archives, jumping over chairs, pushing people out of the way. Type in all the reference numbers from the card, and dispatch 34, the letter, comes up. And I'm frantically looking and looking and looking, and there's no attachment. And again, at the very last second, as they're flicking the lights of the archives to tell people to get out, on the very last page, if you flip over the last page of Josiah Barton's letter, there is a note from an archivist, God love him, that said that the newspaper, the attached newspaper, was taken out by a representative of Andrew Stevenson, who was a Jefferson crony and an ambassador to England, and not returned. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one people like.
What?
And so this ties to the people opposed to hoax. There's no contemporaneous evidence that any of this happened, is there? The letter, the specific letter from Josiah Martin to Germain in Dispatch 34 reads, is almost perfectly as I remember. The results of a committee in Mecklenburg, which your lordship will find in the enclosed newspaper, the one that's missing, surpass all the horrid and treasonable publications that the inflammatory spirits of this continent have yet produced. What was it looking at? We don't know. Because the Jefferson crony, yeah, was it the Borean Resolves? Nolan? Was it Nolan? I don't think it was. Have some of that.
I'm realizing right now I should have left myself some time for a rebuttal. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. So you had noted that there are ebbs and flows of the commemoration. When we live in a city, Charlotte, with so many individuals who have moved here throughout the various waves, it becomes evident as those of us who have lived here for, my family moved here in 1975. And being here as long as I have, and I was 4, what do you think contributes to the ebb, right? It's the idea that we saw images in the exhibit of massive celebrations. So what do you think, or what have you written about that lends itself to why we aren't having a massive 250th celebration in the city of Charlotte right now?
That's a great question. Well, we'll see next year what national celebrations for 1776 look like. But I'm not sure we're going to see 100,000 people like those either. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So I mean, it's indicative of history, generally speaking, in the contemporary world, I would say. Now, the ebb and flow question is, this story kind of got diluted and sort of lost its cachet. I would say in the 80s and 90s, when you did a lot of people moving here who had no interest or knowledge of the story. Again, as I've said a couple times, there's nothing tangible that you see that goes, oh, I need to understand what that is, right? So it's kind of hidden in plain view and sort of short place names or whatever. But what we found in the last 10 years, sort of counterintuitively, is so many people coming to Charlotte who later love it and moved in the last 5 years, are looking for something authentic and interesting about it, and their friends come to town. And you move here, you're uptown Charlotte, you're 26 years old, working in IT and live in South End, and you think, what a great city, it's obviously 11 years old. So when you hear this story, you're like, oh my God, this is so unbelievable. So we've actually so those people have actually been a huge advocate for the recent ebb of this story because it has a tendency to radicalize you. So the joke is of 100 people you tell a story to, 90 couldn't care less. 7 or 8 are like, pretty interesting, maybe I'll read David's book, maybe I'll come here and listen to you guys or whatever it is. And 2 will go completely down the rabbit hole and become obsessed with this story. And so we're looking for the 10% people. And as that grows, you have more tangible things to look at. And in exhibitions like this, it only is going to spread the radicalization.
I was just going to add that in talking to Scott and looking at the reactions to the book, or responses to the book, I have changed my mind too. And I originally thought it's all the people like myself moving into Charlotte who aren't from Charlotte and aren't defending her and aren't defending the talk. But I found that the people who come into Charlotte who are new here with a fresh perspective and haven't heard their uncle quoting Wikipedia about it's a hoax, they're actually more receptive than anyone to those. So that would be kind of cool too if all of our new neighbors are the ones that helped revive our history.
One other thing I'll mention is that, like I said in my talk, it became official government policy that the MECDEC's real in 1831. Now it's sort of flipped around, right? If you look on NCpedia, which is our nerd North Carolina Wikipedia, if you look at the MECDEC, the first line is something like, the alleged MECDEC that was alleged to have been signed allegedly on the, they were really hedged, right? And so there's a quote in the exhibit too from one of the archivists, I think it's from the 60s, where he basically, the head archivist of the North Carolina State Archives says it's a fake.
Jefferson Brody.
So, Brody are all over it. See something, say something.
Hey, Nolan, there's a great story talking about sort of the government dictating the MECDEC, but there was, I can't remember which celebration it was, but in classic Scots-Irish Charlotte tradition, there was a lot of people maybe over celebrated or were overserved at the celebration, and they were put in a holding tank, and they brought them out in front of a judge, and the judge basically said, he would ask them for the name, and then he would say, "Do you swear that the MECDEC is real?" And if the person in jail said, "Yes, Your Honor," he would say, "Okay, dismissed on your own." Yeah, sorry.
The McNiff rough notes, the way I understand it, those are the official meeting minutes of the convention on May 19th, 20th. Is that not correct?
Yes, Nolan forgot to put those up on the screen. They were found with other documents from that era, from the 1770s. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no one knows. And the reason we don't really know is because at the bottom, they're torn. And so it says either 89 or 09 or 79 or 89. And so no one knows when they were written, right? So they were written in 1804, were they written earlier? And he's talking about these really interesting papers that still exist, and they're probably the size of a piece of index cards. I mean, not very big, but they're splattered with stuff. There's all sorts of crossouts. They're ripped in half at the bottom, and crucially, the date's missing. So it's not clear what they are. That is a good theory. That's what they are. But like a lot of the paper chase in this story, you can't definitively. This would be Nolan's point. You can't definitively say this is what this is. This is the provenance of this document is clear. That's just a fact. What's that? That's a great question. We looked at the card dating these papers, and for some reason it couldn't be done. I forget what it was. Yeah, maybe that was it. And it also would only put it within like 25 years or something, I recall. So, I know. Or always so close, and it's like you get the door shut.
All right, we got time for one more question. I'm going to take it already.
Thank you. I'll do this one. I'll be quick. I'll say a comment and then a question. So, one thing that we in the history community in Charlotte, I think this might be a newer thing, to the point of the hundreds of thousands of people, because the Boston Tea Party commemoration had hundreds of thousands of people. The reenactments just in April in Massachusetts, many people, right? But Boston is a town built on tourism. Charleston, South Carolina, is a town built on tourism. These harbor towns, we are not a town born and built on tourism of history. So That's the piece that we will continue to contend with, to figure out how do we get over that hurdle. And I think to the point that you all made and that Nolan has made and everyone has made is that we have to all keep doing our part and we have to keep supporting each other in the history community, really coming together to help lift up these stories because they're so important. So that's my comment. And then my question is, can you talk just a bit about this, was it the Cape Fear newspaper hoax? Talk a little bit about that. The hoax?
Oh, yeah, there was and again, you talk about, I think the MECDEC was the original government conspiracy. And then it was also the victim of the original decades of misinformation. And I think that has to do with many more elements that we can probably discuss right now. But one of them was there was a hoax where a guy claimed to have had the original document, tried to sell it to representatives of Charlotte. And I think it was I really feel like that was a tipping point for the misinformation because it was like Charlie Brown getting the football taken out. I think people in Charlotte were like, we're done being fooled and being fun of trying to find this evidence. And it turned out to be a hoax. He didn't have the actual documents or anything like that. Yes, yeah. And then that guy later was beaten up by a MECDEC believing librarian in Savannah. So just don't mess with the MECDEC. Yeah, so many things.
Okay, with all of the interest and everyone here, with all of the theory and the challenging of theory and the challenging of what is real and what is not, why not make a run towards the ones that will really bring the interest, like Hollywood? It's just a simple question. Why not put it in the hands of someone that is going to write a story, believable or not, but it's going to bring the interest, which will probably anchor all of us into believing. Why not, baby?
That has been forefront for 20 years with our attempts to do this. I will assure you of that. We do have his name is completely escaped me, Evan Carlock, that's right. He was a Davidson graduate who has written a screenplay. He raised $1 million of the $2 million he's got to raise. He just saw him the other night. And he is in discussions with Tom Hanks' people. He tells us are super interested in this. Hopefully he's done another books thing. But no, he's serious. He's in LA. He's from Davidson, from Charlotte. He lives out in LA. And he's halfway there, knock on wood, to doing exactly that. So hopefully that's a stay tuned situation.